Well, good afternoon, and welcome to KTOE's Talk of the Town. And 1 year out from the next election, we're talking today with Republican congressional candidate Jim Hagedorn. Jim, good to see you. You, of course, have a very well-known political name in this area.
Well, thanks. Thanks, Pete. It's great to be here. A few years ago, my father represented this area in Congress, and people here in the Mankato, Blue Earth County area have always been nice to my family, and I really appreciate everything they've done for us.
And you did spend quite a bit of time in Washington. You know the ropes in Washington, so to speak. You were there for, a couple of decades before you came back here?
I worked for Congressman Arlen Stanglin of 7th District, Minnesota, a very conservative congressman, and also had a stint behind enemy lines, as I call it, inside the bureaucracy, where I actually cut my own agency and eliminated bureaucrat jobs. So, I know my way around the Capitol and Washington, D.C., but that's an advantage. I know how government functions and dysfunctions, know where the bodies are buried, and I'm ready to go unearth them and fight for the taxpayers.
Now, you said there are two words I want to focus on there. You said behind enemy lines, and you said government dysfunction. And what we've been watching this week seems to most people, and I think on both sides of the aisle, as dysfunction. They just have such difficult time getting the job done. Would you have a prescription for that?
There are two sides to this. One is that you're seeing political battles unfold, and some of what was going on last week and the week before was because I think in a very partisan way, Democrats, including Tim Walz, passed Obamacare, and it's something that the American people are having troubles with. It isn't being implemented very well, and I think ultimately a lot of people think it's going to hurt them. And so Republicans are standing up saying, we need to talk about this, we need to do something about that. And then now we're into the second phase of it, where we're talking about the debt limit. And under the president, the debt's gone up of 50%. I mean, it's a huge increase, and we all know that at some point we're going to have to pay the piper, and this just can't continue. So you're seeing a political struggle unfold, and sometimes that's healthy in the long run.
And I know Obamacare's had a lot of problems in the rollout, and I know that there are huge disagreements with it. What I'm wondering is it worth risking everybody's 401k, with the predictions that Wall Street, if the dysfunction continues, will tank, go down 500, 600 points, to include that with the resolution to raise the debt limit?
Yeah, no one wants to see the economy or the market or anything tank. But what happens a lot when we get in these struggles is we hear that if we don't feed big government, if big government doesn't get its way, then everybody's going to lose. And ultimately, it seems like the more we help big government, the average individual in this country is hurting. And there is a difference in philosophy. Conservatives like myself think we need to really rein in spending. We need to do some things that are going to help the economy grow in the private sector, not the government sector. And liberals like Tim Walz been on the other side. When he came into office in 2006, he said Bush and the Republicans were spending too much money. He was right back then. Bush and the Republicans doubled the national debt, and we didn't handle our things the way we should have. But since then, the national debt's gone up about $9 trillion under Congressman Walz, and yet he still wants to blame the Republicans. So I think people are looking for leaders who will call it like they see it, stand up to power in their own party, and do what they think is right for the people.
Let me ask you, there's a spectrum of Republicans, even in Minnesota. We have a pretty wide spectrum of Republican Congressman Eric Peterson and John Klein and Michelle Bachmann. Would you align yourself with any one of those three? Would you say that I'd be like so-and-so if you were going to Washington?
No, I've always tried to be my own person. And the reason I want to go to Washington is because I believe the government has become so big and so powerful that the people are almost in fear of their government. Now, I call it a period of soft tyranny. And I think the only way to reverse that is to send selfless, courageous leaders who are going to put the country and the people ahead of power, money, and career, and try to take those broad powers from Washington, take them from the establishment, and send them back to the states and the people. And if we do that, then the people are in a better position to get the government that they want.
Can you give me an example of how we might return government to the states and to the people?
I'll give you a couple. One would be broad-based tax reform, which would essentially take a lot of power from Washington and return it to the people, the individual, so people are able to spend and invest the way they choose, not the way the government or the Congress kind of coaxes them to use their money. Another would be take all the transportation money and send it back to the states in the form of block grants. And that way, instead of the bureaucrats and the politicians deciding where the monies are going to be spent in our states, we would have governors and legislators and other local officials with that type of involvement.
I know you have a farm background, and there's been a lot of disagreement in Washington on forming a new farm bill. Now, for forever, it seems, that's been a bill that hasn't been a partisan bill. People on both sides of the aisle have had interests in getting a bill through. Now they're trying to break it apart and to piecemeal it out. Do you agree with that approach?
Well, I was at Farm Fest and spoke with a lot of the ag groups, and I was there when Congressman Walz and former Chairman Peterson gave their talk, and I respectfully watched and so forth. I have a little bit of a different view than maybe some of the other candidates on this. I think, first of all, the nutrition programs, that part of the Farm Bill, they do need to be reformed, and we need work for welfare, which is something in the stimulus bill, that big $1 trillion spending bill that Congressman Walz voted for. They pretty much eliminated all the work requirements for welfare. That was a mistake. We need to put that back in. When I worked for Congressman Stanglin, we carried that bill for a number of years, and then it became the law of the land under Clinton and Gingrich. But as far as the Farm Bill is concerned, we're going to get a Farm Bill, and ultimately I predict the Republicans will put that nutrition and Farm Bill back together. We'll have one bill. I don't think the Republicans want to have 400 or 500 ag groups mad at them for the next election, and so I predict that that's the way it's going to go down.
So you think right now that's just a negotiating tactic?
Exactly.
Bring maybe the Senate to the table to narrow the differences there.
Sure. Sometimes they take a little stand and they know down the road what the end game's going to be. And I cautioned other Republicans running who were saying, "Oh, let's split it up and let's do this." I said, you know what, a year from now, that's probably the position you didn't want to take, because I think the leaders in Washington sometimes have a strategy that we're not aware of. But having been there, I can kind of predict it and see where it's going. So I think that's what's going to happen.
In the 2014 year, there had been a lot of thought that because of Obamacare, it would be a good year for Republicans to run, that would be a good issue to run against. Has the stalemate in Washington, is that, it seems that most of the polls indicate that Republicans are getting more of the blame than Democrats are.
Probably because most of the pollsters are Democrats. That tends to happen, and a lot of media types. I think a year from now, nobody's going to remember what's going on in Washington right now. But as more and more people feel the effects of Obamacare, if more and more people understand it as it's being rolled out or laid out in front of them, there's an adage, and it's something I like to talk about in politics: friends come and friends go, but enemies accumulate. And with this Obamacare thing, I think enemies are going to accumulate. Our Congressman, Mr. Walz, voted for a bill that it's going to ration care, drive up costs, degrade medicine. It's a bureaucratic Washington, D.C.-based control nightmare. And ultimately, the people in southern Minnesota, particularly people in Rochester and people that rely on medical care and health care in southern Minnesota, are going to see that this is something that's made them vulnerable. And so I'm on the other side. I'm for repeal and replacement with free enterprise reforms. Congressman Wallace is taking an ideological approach that we have to continue with this Obamacare, as bad as it is. And so there's going to be a great divide between us, and the people are going to have a very clear contrast come November 2014.
I didn't get this story myself. I read it from Josh Moniz in the Mankato Free Press, that the National Republican Congressional Committee is attacking Congressman Walz on the basis that he is holding up veterans' benefits in lieu of getting an agreement on the debt ceiling and on funding the government. Would you attack him on his approach to veterans affairs?
Well, there's something to what they're saying in their commercials. The way I come down on this is that, first of all, we honor the service of all people that served our country, especially our veterans. And so I honor Congressman Walz's time in the National Guard. I'm never going to try and take anything like that away from someone. But this election, being in Congress, has nothing to do with your service in the National Guard or the military. It's about your service in the United States House of Representatives. And since Congressman Walz has been elected, he's been nothing but a foot soldier for the left wing of the Democrat Party, taking direct commands from Nancy Pelosi. He's way out of step with Obamacare, cap and trade, Dodd-Frank, abortion in the 7th, 8th, 9th month of pregnancy. Those are very liberal views and out of step with the people of southern Minnesota. And I think as people realize that he's just a liberal congressman, not necessarily he's a veteran liberal congressman, let's put it that way. And I think people will not vote for him once they realize just where he comes from.
You know, I am not that familiar with all of his position, but has he really advocated abortion in the 7th, 8th, and 9th month of
Yeah, he
pregnancy?
voted for it on the floor. There was a woman's health bill, they called it, and the Republicans tried to shut those types of abortions down. He voted on the other side.
Okay.
Even liberals, 90% of the people here in southern Minnesota, even liberals in Europe, think that that's ridiculous. So he's an extremist on the social issues. He always has been.
All right. Now, there was a word that Dave Senjum from Rochester might throw his hat in the ring. Is that do you foresee a big battle in the endorsement process?
Well, the endorsement process is really important. You have the activists of the party, the people that do the work, making the decisions. I support that. I would never take it to a primary. I would abide by their wishes. And that's what we're trying to do in this campaign is we're trying to not only win 160 delegates to get the nomination, but we're trying to run a campaign across this district to let people know about our conservative message and Congressman Walz's liberalism to try to win 160,000 votes in order to win in 2014. Anyone that wants to get in the race, I welcome. Competition's a good thing, makes you a better candidate. Senator Senjum, I've met him a few times, seems like a good guy. And again, it's for everyone else to make their own individual decision.
But we have a way to go to the endorsement, obviously. But so I'm hearing you say that you would not take it to a primary. You wouldn't fight the endorsement.
No, in this case, when you have an incumbent congressman who has a lot of advantages, he has. I have pretty good name ID from the olden days, which helps. But he's going to have a 97% name ID, and he's going to show up with $1.5 million to $2 million. And hey, Tim Walz is a pretty spirited campaigner. You got to give him his due there. So he has advantages. And in order for a Republican a challenger to beat an incumbent and take the seat away from someone, especially someone with those advantages, you need everybody in the party behind you. And I tell all the Republican groups across the southern Minnesota, I'm the candidate that is attracting people from a broad spectrum of the Republican Party. And some of my friends say, oh, does that mean you change your message and you're not a conservative because you're trying to placate different people? And I say, absolutely not. What we do is go out and run a spirited race. We take this fight to Tim Walz. We show people that there's a path to victory, and then they get behind us. And we need all Republicans to win this race.
Now, I know we haven't heard the ads here in the Mankato area yet, but the very fact that the NRCC did devote some money indicates kind of a change that they maybe believe that, whether it's because of Obamacare or whatever, that Congressman Walz has become a bit more vulnerable. I think 2 years ago he was regarded as a fairly safe seat in the hands of Democrats in the 2012 election.
Well, a lot of politics is about the trends. And you saw what happened in 2010, and Congressman Walz was held to under 50% of the vote and almost lost. Some trends are better than others. It depends. The pendulum swings in politics. So we'll see. I have a sneaking suspicion here that as more and more people understand how damaging Obamacare is, and I refer to it as a cancer that's been injected into the medical system that has to be eradicated or we're going to have troubles. And, frankly, I can't blame everything on Democrats on this one. Republicans had control of the House, Senate, and White House in the early part of this century, and we didn't handle our stuff on health care. We didn't do what I think we need, the broad-based free enterprise reforms, competition for insurance across state lines. We didn't do things like tying the tax benefits to the individual, so people didn't have to be married to their job. They could have portable benefits and take their health care from job to job. We didn't do tort reform, which would help drive down cost in some areas. And there are several other reforms that I put out on my Facebook page for our campaign. If we had done those types of things when we had power, I don't think there would have been a vacuum for the Democrats to come in and do Washington, D.C.-based control of our medical care system. And so what that taught me, the lesson is when Republicans hold power, when conservatives are in control, we have to do our broad-based reforms and and fight for what we believe.
What I'm hearing you say is sort of an answer to the criticism that has been leveled against Republicans that they are viciously attacking Obamacare, but have not offered an alternative. I'm hearing you say that there needs to be a Republican alternative, and you've named some of the possible components of that. Health savings accounts?
Health savings accounts is a big one. The more power you can give to the individual to pay for his or her health care, the more likely they're going to shop, the more likely they're only going to seek care when they actually need it. You hold that money yourself, it's your own. That's very important. That, combined with catastrophic coverage, can help a lot of people. But Obamacare, I mean, people don't realize for a younger person under 30 usually spends less than $500 a year on medical care. Under Obamacare, they're going to be charged with spending $5,500 a year, and that's because, like usual, we're trying to get the young people to pay for the older people. We're trying to get the healthy people to pay for the sick people. It's kind of a socialist scheme, and it's really tough, especially on people who don't have a lot of money or are just starting out in work, have a lot of debt. That's going to be brutal on our younger generation.
We're just about out of time here. People can find out more about your positions at jimhagedorn.org. Is that the website?
Or do Hagedorn for Congress and go on my Facebook page. We pretty much show people where we campaign day to day and what we're up to, and I put positions on the issues out on that as well.
All right. Well, it's good talking to you today here on KTOE's Talk of the Town. Jim Hagedorn, thank you.
Well, thank you, Pete.
That is today's edition of Talk of the Town.